Welcome to the South Fork Sea Farmers Present. Today's topic is art inspired by the sea. Our guests are Jody Cuquier, did I get it right?
Yep,
All
she
right,
did.
good. And Meredith O'Leary,
No.
two local artists who do not work with brushes, paints, and easels, but find their medium and their palette in our local waters. From shells and marine life, they create art that inspires. And I am your host, Bob Tiemann. So, you're both native Long Islanders. This is your home. How did growing up here on the island kind of lead you to where you are today, to your art?
Well, I think that proximity and access, familiarity. This is an environment that you could get to, that was easy to get to, was no entry to barrier. You know, there's no barrier. You could drive to a beach, you could park somewhere, and you could be on the water. And so water sports and water activity, is a comfortable and familiar place, and soothing because of its own, inherent qualities.
Oh yeah, I couldn't imagine growing up away from the water at all or anywhere else. We're very lucky.
And you were really eastern end of
Yeah.
Long Island,
Yeah.
so I was mid-island, South Shore. So it's a little different to say, Long Island,
Yes,
because it's so different
so
and
different.
such different access.
Yeah, I'm way out on the east end, and I loved having the bay and the ocean right basically at my back door. I was really lucky.
And I grew up eating the seafood,
Yeah.
shellfish that people out here were catching, because I was pretty close at the eastern end of Nassau County to Suffolk. So the South Shore, sort of toward the Hamptons, but I'd never really been to the Hamptons growing up per se, or the east end of Long Island.
So your families was going to the beach a normal family trip? Was that something that
Every
was
day.
every day?
All summer long, absolutely.
And being also a Nassau County person, it couldn't be an everyday thing because
Point Lookout.
we had bridges to go over.
That's right, that's right. We were near the Wantagh State, and we went down to the South Shore at Point Lookout, where the beach clubs were spotting, like from Colony to Sands, the Coral Reef. And my parents had a cabana. If any of you have seen the movie Flamingo Kid, you can pretty much understand the beach club life. So it was a real visiting journey. It wasn't a year-round, it was a seasonal thing to do, whereas now, living out here, the access and the appeal year-round.
It's definitely year round.
It's a lot of layers. I
Yeah.
even have worn goggles to walk along the beaches because the wind and the cold makes my eyes tear so much I can't see in front of me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember winters, my mom would go out clamming and take me and my sister in a little boat behind her. So we were never, but so it was year round for me.
Yeah, which is a very different
Yes.
experience from growing up,
Okay.
mid-island, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't go to the beach in the winter except if you parked in the car, maybe looked a little bit and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we go on, some of our viewers might not be familiar with your work. So let's take a look at a few pieces
Okay.
so that when we say inspired by the sea, people know why we're saying that. Jody, why don't you start with a few of your pieces?
Sure. The first piece that I think I have, if we're going right to slides, if I could ask, the sea, of course, has many soothing and nurturing elements to it by dint of its own character. The sound, the smell, the tidal rhythms, and those rhythms became essential to my existence when 12 years ago, it's about to be 13 years in February, my 13-year-old daughter was killed crossing the street for a school bus in Los Angeles. And so my access to the sea on the West Coast, the ocean, a very different environment, that was an immediate instinct of mine. It was the go-to behavior of where I needed to be for the isolation. And I think that that chaos and grief, are so big in your own system that to put yourself out at a horizon line and to be part of the vastness of nature helped me feel smaller, to manage what it is that I was going to do to put one foot in front of the other. And I did that by walking along the beach. And I did that by collecting. And in the palm of my hand, if you do want to show
Yeah, please put up
the first
that
slide.
first slide, Jody. There it
In
is.
the palm of my hand, I have to take a sip of water because I can't just tell people and that I'm meeting for the first time why I'm down at the beach every day. I found beauty in pieces that were broken. I found design that endured, the tumbling, the tossing, the fractures, and if I could pick that up and use that as a metaphor for what it is that I might do to think about my own station in this world, these little survivors that were survivors in their beauty and in their original creation, I could collect them and feel some sense of delight. And the water gave me that, and gave me that grounding, and gave me that footing. And I went down and I just gathered them in my hands, and then I gathered them in bags and bowls, and I would bring them back to where I was living at the time in Los Angeles. And now I had a storage issue. Now I have so much that I'm collecting, jars and vessels, beer flats, the way they cut them around when they come in, any rattan basket. So in the next image, you could see that on a tray, I was taking mussel shells and stacking them inside
That's
one
beautiful.
another. And as I stacked them and as they nested inside each other, they had to balance. I built them up. Maybe they would knock over. I would have to rebuild. And this balancing act of relying on beauty for my own stability became something that gave me great pleasure to do. And that's all I was doing, was doing something for myself with things that I could find naturally. And the balancing and the shells and the tray became so overwhelming that I realized I wanted to build something. I wanted to take broken pieces and build something with them and rebuild my existence. And I think in the next image, I share with you the first things I started to do, which were bowls. And those bowls were put together not because any one shell was so heroic in its own beauty, but because of the way in which that beauty was created by them leaning and being shaped on one another. And they were sometimes cracked fragments. They were different varieties. They were just assemblies that would give me a moment of delight and wonder. And if I could create that in myself, then that was a window into survival. And I'm skipping over entirely the idea of street safety advocacy and working with the middle school peer group, had been traumatized by this event in the community, because of course that's not the topic today. But I don't want to dismiss that because that repair process was an emotional one, not just, originally an artistic invention of mine. And the ability to work with the material and as it lay before me, to just grab the things and work with them as they present themselves, was a way in which I sort of saw my life, that I had this thrown at my feet and I had to shape and work with it as I found it. And I would work with pieces and had a philosophy that I wasn't supposed to sand or smooth or shape them in any way, because the jagged edge, the sharp, abrasive edge was what I had to wake up with. But then I decided, as my life took shape and as I lived out here and relocated and developed an existence on the East End, I thought, well, I can smooth those edges. I can take a little more command artistically and emotionally. And that's where, in the next piece, if you wanted to bring that up, I show you as I collected whelks, how dynamic they were as I just gathered them. But then how I found still remaining inside those sharp edges of the beauty and grace that remained inside. And it was okay to do that. It was okay to experience that, as opposed to the harshness that one might feel all the time. Now, have I shown the balls yet? I'm confused in my own
Yeah, we
order.
saw the balls.
Okay, if I could just pick one up and show you
Sure,
now,
that'd be
all
great,
right.
that'd be great.
I just brought the local clamshells that I've collected, that are purple, which is a significant color. But when you're building the bowl and there's a form inside, a balloon, to give away a trade secret, in order to come in, above the equator, you have to be able to deflate it to take it out, or pop it, as often would be the case in the middle of building. And the surprise of what those designs and that layout would be on the inside, you would sort of have to have faith as you were building on the outside, sort of like turning a bowl on a lathe, if you know some woodworking, that how the grain and how the shape was going to appear would be set already. And it was just a great deal of fun. And I think that
Beautiful.
the sturdiness and the strength of it, even though there is great fragility in many of the different shells.
It looks like I'd be afraid to pick it up. I'm like thinking with my clumsy
It's
hands, I don't
gorgeous.
want to touch
You
that.
should be, okay, because I'm not gonna let you pick it up.
Okay, good.
But I think that the character, the fact that that duality exists between carrying the fragility, but finding its strength, is exactly what I do every day. And in many ways, what I'm finding in the material are the metaphors and little philosophical crumbs that I develop for myself to come up with really a spiritual set of guideposts. So I would say that those pieces, I'm probably in the fifth slide that I have to share right now. Those pieces show you sort of the physical development of it, and as I did create that process, I was packing up that tray of mussel shells, and I took a photograph of it for the inventory so that I could land on the East Coast and know what I had put into the moving van. And the image representing it in photography was, I realized, an art form unto itself, not just the material, that I really wasn't going to be able to share that easily with other people in any great volume. And that photograph of the mussel shells and a few others made me realize that this may be something that I would do full time, and talk about and put in front of others who just might like the art or might like art as it relates to managing stress and grief as a process that you could come to.
I know when I was looking at your website, you have the same photo of the mussel shells, also in black and white. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and Long Island, thank you very much, the East End, because the awareness of what was happening in the waterways, as of course this group very much deals with, the starkness, the way in which that represented not just a graphic, but what was happening as shells and their life changes as the waterways carry perils for them. The black and white, or even there's some with a tint of red on it that I call red tide, the way in which that was impacting what it is I was seeing, and how collecting was a catalog of what the waters were doing to the seashells. And so you're out there, saving the shells, and the shells were out there saving me. So I love this organizational parallel between the two of us. And if I could just say about Meredith, who hasn't had a chance yet to introduce her work, but who's going to stop me? Your reliance on a Japanese art form, which I'm so eager to hear about, was such a great pairing for me, because kintsugi is a Japanese art form of using the fractures and using the cracks in ceramics and pottery, that when you repair it, you're not trying to hide the crack and the breakage. You're trying to use that vein, staple, whatever your repair tool would be, in a new piece of the work, in a new feature of the work. And so we are both relying, unrelated to
Yeah,
themselves,
it's
I think.
beautiful.
So I appreciate now hearing
That's
about
beautifully
that,
said.
learning more of that.
So Meredith,
Yes.
I'll give a shot at pronunciation. Kiyotaku?
Kyotaku,
All right, I
yes.
did it right.
Yes, very
Yeah,
good.
I didn't know how to do it.
Before we even look at some of the slides you prepared, I want you to talk about your shirt, because it amazes me that it came into being this morning.
Yeah,
So
well,
talk a little bit about that.
I realized that I didn't have one of my shirts that was in good enough condition. Most of them were sold, they have holes in them, and couldn't wear one. So I had to quick thaw my triggerfish. This is a triggerfish that I keep in the freezer for my shirts. So I thawed it out, got a black long sleeve t-shirt, and I put the ink directly onto the fish's body. And then I do a rubbing with the shirt. So it's the actual fish's image on the shirt, the fins, the scales. And then I go in and I detail and paint the eye.
And then does the fish go back in the freezer for next
Back
time?
in the freezer for next time.
That's pretty good. Fantastic. I mean, they probably can't see it on TV, but with the other items, but the detail on that shirt is
Oh, yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I love it. The fins come out so beautifully every
It is
time.
beautiful.
It's difficult sometimes if I lay the shirt wrong, or a smudge, or the fin gets, if it smudges, it's ruined. So it's been a lot of practice.
Let's take a look at some of your other works.
Sure. The first slide is a yellowfin tuna. And that one was a fairly decent-sized fish. And it takes me quite a while. First, I go in with black ink, and I use a white fabric. And I put just the black ink on the fish, and I have to make sure that there's no, nowhere too thick, nowhere too light. And then I do a rubbing. I lay the material right onto the body of the fish, do a rubbing, have to make sure all the fins are splayed out properly, and I have to put props behind them to kind of hold them up so when I press them, they don't move and smudge. And then this yellowfin tuna, I wanted to do full color because they're such a pretty fish. So I went in and I added it true to its color through my eyes. And all the little finlets are very yellow. That's one of my favorite fish to do, is the yellowfin, and also my favorite to eat. That made a very good sushi.
So how big was that fish?
It was about 3 feet long, 4 feet long. Yeah, 4 feet long. I wish I could remember in inches, but it was a very nice yellowfin tuna. And then I also do a lot of striped bass, which is the next slide if you'd like to see. Sorry for the glare in the photo. So this striped bass I caught myself surf casting 2 falls ago. This fall I didn't have very much luck with the striped bass.
I'm already annoyed. I've surf cast for days on end and never caught a thing. So
Days. Yeah, this one I got lucky, and it was a nice keeper size. So I brought it home and immediately got right to work on it. I have to wash it off, get all the slime off, and then again splay all the fins. And this one I chose to just do black ink on the white material. So I put the ink on the body, laid the fabric on again, did the rubbing, and then I go in and add all the detailing, the stripes and the eye and any shading I see. And then that one, of course, the same day that I caught it and printed it, I filleted it and we had it for dinner. It was very
So
good fish.
he's not in the freezer waiting for it.
No, very few are. And then if you'd like to see the next slide, this is a tile fish. I actually was just printing tile fish yesterday. This one I like to go in and add color to because they're such a beautiful fish. One of my favorites to eat. And that was a good sized fish. That was about over a foot long,
Okay.
maybe 2 feet long. A nice big one. Yeah, I like the touches of color on the tile fish. And that one, of course, was eaten after as well.
And the little oddities show up, like the bump on the head? It
Yes.
shows up so,
Yeah, that's a very unique feature to the tile fish. I just love them. They live deep, deep sea in holes. They're a unique species of fish. And then if you'd like to see the next slide, it's a sea bass, which people catch here quite often. One of my favorites to eat. And this one I wanted to go in and give the color of blue. When you catch them, they look almost tropical. They have such bright blues and purples and a lot of colors come out on them. So this one I went in and colored the way I saw fit to keep it true. I do enjoy both catching, printing,
I
and
noticed
eating
on
them.
on the website, you seem to be fishing all the time.
Yeah,
So with
as
your
much as
children fishing.
possible. Yes. Oh yeah, I love it. And then the next one is one of my favorites. These 3 fish I caught in one day, just right outside of Shinnecock. The top is a chub mackerel, the middle one is a mackerel, and the bottom is a bonito. It was a small bonito. And I like looking at this one because it just shows me the differences and yet the similarities in the species. Sometimes you go out and you catch one or the other of these and you can't tell what's what.
Right.
But once you really see them, the fins and the detail and the color, even the size of the eye, it really shows the difference.
You can see why a chub mackerel is called a chub mackerel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those I did smoke them all, so they were very good. Nothing goes to waste in my house. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be able to go out and do what I love and catch the fish, and then in the same day go home and clear the kitchen island and get to printing.
Now, how did you learn to do this technique?
I'm self-taught, and I started about a little over 17 years ago, just wanting to document my own catches. I was very interested to see the true size of fish that I caught instead of I hold out the fish close to the camera so that it looks way bigger than it is. So it's a good way to document the actual fish.
Which is how this art form actually evolved in Japan.
In Japan over
to
100 years
document.
ago. Yes, to document the different shapes of the fish, the different sizes of the fish. And once I realized that it was a thing that had started in Japan, I was like, I've got to try this. I catch enough fish. I've got to give it a go. And then it developed into something I was like, this is really beautiful. I enjoy doing this.
And that seems to be, I guess to be as passionate about anything, both of you seem to really love what you're doing, need what you're doing.
Yes. Oh, it's for the soul. I need it for my soul.
I think that that's a gift, to be able to call upon that, to have something that can give you a sense of wonder, delight, that creates curiosity, as time passes, and that captures you. I mean, I think that can be very hard for people to find something that they do feel passionate about, and I also feel grateful, which it's a funny thing to say in relationship to my body of work and art and how I came to it, that I can do it, that I have access, and that I have, a situation in life where I can spend the time doing this to restore and recreate.
Right.
Not everybody is in that position.
Yeah.
So, but you have your training, you have an art background and I
Yes.
believe a degree in art therapy also?
Well, I studied art and psychology
Okay.
in college, and art therapy. I was very interested in the physical, tactile, sensory process overall. You know, I was always involved in ceramic arts, woodworking, batik, some printmaking. I wasn't drawing and painting and sketching as much as I was getting my hands messy, working with tools, things that made noise, glue, things that had time and processing and setting. And that physicality is something that had become a great resource for me to tap into, because using all your senses, your five senses, to the extent that you have them and you curate and develop them, is something I needed every one of them when I hit the crisis in my life. So the art therapy was a way in which you might be able to express yourself when you don't have access to the words. When you lose a child in a sudden catastrophic event, and people say that there are no words, well, those two thoughts, converge in this kind of work, where that's what I cared about on an academic and clinical level, and then here I was putting it to practical use. Well, when there are no words, what is there? Shellfish. And so that background helped a lot. But I also have to give a nod to the fact that I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, that my father was an Auschwitz survivor from Poland, and that this was my personal Holocaust, but that training of living with somebody who appreciated everything that his family and this country had to offer him, and to hear how it is that he survived, which was largely through stitching, repairing guard uniforms. He was young, he came from a textile background in Lodge, and that relationship, as much as growing up near the waters, not quite the edge, but getting to it, really shaped me as a person, and how I see these bits that I would hold in the palm of my hand as these little, artistic design survivors, and what the possibilities were. So I would say that the academic background, the life circumstance background together forge, point of view.
I love that idea of art when there are no words. That
Yeah.
seems to be what art is.
Yeah, good expression, way to express yourself.
I mean, you can
Amazing
give
form
me
of
a sense of the
expressionism.
fish,
Yeah.
what the detail is, and your use of color, what it might feel like, the texture, the swell of the body.
The smell.
The slipperiness. I don't know
Yes.
how you get how slippery
Yes,
these things can be.
they really can be.
Yeah, I've tried to hold one
And
reluctantly.
it differs from species to species. Some fish are very, very slimy. The triggerfish is not. They almost have like a dinosaur armor. They're completely different. They
feel
don't have
more like a
scales.
snake,
They have,
more like a snake when you pick
Yeah.
up a snake. Yeah.
and when you dry the skin, it actually, you can make nail files out of it.
Oh my goodness.
I have a bunch of dried skins just from filleting, and you can use them like sandpaper. It's
Yeah.
amazing skin. So they're all different. And the tilefish, like I was just working on, they're very, very slimy. You have to really scrub them down.
Do you have a network of artists you collaborate with or know or just discuss ideas with?
Oh yeah, I couldn't do it without them. My framers, friends that are artists that I've known for a very long time, even all my life. Family, you need the support network, wouldn't you find?
Well, I think that the art-centric focus of being out on the East End, the number of institutions, the member organizations. I mean, for me, I'm out here 7 years, maybe 4 or 5 full time, and so it's taking a lot longer to get to know that network. But the Southampton Artists Association, the John Germain Library in Sag Harbor, Guildhall, they all have ways in which they bring artists together, and there's so many arts events. I mean, at the parish, there's something every Friday night, in addition, of course, to their constant programming. But all of these institutions do have ways in which to get involved and to meet other people. And since photography has been something that I've learned a lot more about as a result of working with one of these groups, I've been able to interpret and develop a different type of art form to represent the shells, not just in their physical quality, but to try to capture that in a two-dimensional quality, and how different that can be. And I like when they're near each other, where you have one form and another form together.
What is your ideal, like, working environment, working conditions? I mean, is it home on the kitchen
Yeah,
table with
mine's
all the
gonna be
kids
much
running
different
around?
than yours, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
but- Jody, when do you create?
75 and sunny, okay? Not the current weather that we have now. You know what? I would say solitude, quiet.
Yeah, it's gotta be quiet.
I find that that I need time to experience the pieces, to assemble, to decide what's going to go together, to experiment. And you were saying that, you know, your practice is self-taught, even though it comes from a tradition that has, you know, a set of rules and a construct to it. You know, I was just inventing what I was doing because I was putting things in trays and storing and then deciding whether to glue them or not. You know, was that permanence at all a violation, you know, of the rules that I had set forth? But that that sense of quiet space, you know, things that are messy. You know, I'm constantly laying things out on my dining room table and cleaning them back up again. You know, I don't have as large a workspace. It's all right now shelves and shelves of specimens and storage. But it's great when you can get back out to the water's edge and it's not freezing.
Yes.
That's really hard.
I like to just wake up in the morning, have the house be empty, and then I'm able to get my fish out of the fridge in the basement, bring it upstairs, try to make sure the dogs don't eat it while I'm working on it if I turn my back. And then I just have to get to work, and I try to focus on the fish and try to, once I have the basic print, I like to just sit and look at it and get a feeling for what the fish was, and I really try to give it a whole new life and a whole new meaning through art with what I do. But it takes a long time of me sitting and painting and looking and thinking.
How do you choose a fish? I mean,
Depends on what I catch that day.
well, you catch that, it's almost all your caught.
Pretty much all mine. Otherwise, from a friend in Montauk, or, you know, sometimes I'll go to the fish market and purchase something like my octopus that I print.
Okay, I've seen that.
I wouldn't ever catch an octopus, but I had to buy one since I saw it to work with. But yeah, that's how I choose to paint what I do.
Now, Jody, when you're collecting, is there any notion about what you're going to create with anything, or are you just looking for interesting things to collect at that stage? And
Well,
With
when I
colors?
arrive at a beach, okay, when I arrive somewhere, I tell myself that you know, you're not looking for a certain thing. You want to see what the shoreline has to offer. You want to see what's there for the taking. And if it's kind of nice when it's not filled with material, where you have to hunt, you have to find, and you have to sort of peck and choose between different beds of seaweed and whatnot to go find that little treasure. Because if you didn't work hard enough for it, well, then it's a cheat. Although that's nice too. But I really look for something that just catches my eye. And when I started to move toward making faces, I was seeing moon snails were eyes. I was seeing vertebrae. They were glasses or noses. There were different bits that were around. And I thought, well, those are interesting, or that has a nice shadow on it. And I would just let it speak to me. And it wouldn't be necessarily to achieve a certain thing. It would just make itself apparent.
Let's bring up some of the faces on the screen so that,
Oh, well,
Is there-
conveniently, I think that might be the next one.
there it
Yeah.
is.
So this series of faces, which as a collection I call he shells and she shells, because they are, of no particular gender, although now that might need to be he, she, and we, so
Right.
I'm now completely behind the times. But I saw characters, but they were all broken apart. They didn't, I just realized I could look at these. They weren't anywhere near this, and I would fit pieces together, and I would start to look for stones that might be heads. But in the lower left, there's one little guy there where it's a tiny little piece of cartilage with two small moon snails inside and a barnacle, to finish the shape of the head as his chin, and a little limpet on a crowned hat. And that was the first face I ever made. And I thought, oh, well, this is kind of funny. And for me, the idea of doing something that was humorous, given the events in my life that had brought me to the art form, was really kind of an interesting combination. And what did that mean, and what did that say about, my own emotional cycle, and that they could be collected out of some originating sense of despair. And yet, when I put them all together, they each had captions. The little one on the lower left is, are you looking at me? Or the one in the lower right corner where the two pieces of vertebrae are like glasses, the doctor is in, or Shell King, or the pair songbirds. I always felt like those two oyster shells, which figure prominently in the series here, why the long face? I think you could pick out which one that is. And each one of them was framed in a show. I did a show called Come Shell or High Water, which was the sort of label of what the body of work was, whether they were glass fragments or seashell bits or stones that had been assembled. And to have the actual faces themselves, the stones that I made, which are very small, obviously, because they're seashell and stone size, made larger, into prints. Well, they could be represented differently and individually. So the fact that I could be funny and be allowed to be funny,
Yes.
was a new dynamic. Not for me as a personality, I was always funny previously, but the fact that I could draw upon that in companion and concert with everything else was kind of, I have to thank them.
Yes. So the process for the faces was then a little different than the process for collecting a similar color
Yes, yes,
quahog shells that evolved into a bowl.
right,
Oh.
right. I mean, in the pieces, they would lie there. If you want to go to the next slide, the fish that I created, this Fish Out of Water series,
I like that.
in the left-hand lower corner, this is one object. It is one shell that is the body of the fish. And you could probably tell me where that fin came from, because I had the two pieces together. I put them together just from different walks on the beach. And for the longest time, I had created that piece. I shot it on different colored backgrounds, and those are 9x12 prints. The prints that I did for the show were all on archival paper, framed in a floating mount, gallery level framing. And it's just one item. It wasn't until I moved out to Long Island and I got involved with this photography group in Sag Harbor that I brought that in, and I said, I don't know what this is, but I found this interesting looking sort of cosmic shell, and in unison, like the whole group of them, oh, that's a sturgeon scale, well, yeah, you know that, right? I mean, everybody
But of
knows
course,
that.
right.
And I was so grateful to learn about it, and I started to read more about the shells, to read more about what was it I was collecting. And one day somebody will come over and go through all of my trays and boxes and give me that idea and information, because I just in that naivete, I wasn't really bound by any marine biology stricture. I just saw it, find it, and put it together. But the rows and rows of shells and the collecting of the sizing and the fitting things together, that really became much more of a primary practice during COVID. There were a lot of days and a lot of hours to be spent out on the beach. And in the next slide, I can show you a little bit of what it feels like to put these things together. The first tray I ever made where it was organized to just fit into the tray, to do the ascending sizes, to move back and forth in that pattern with a fixed, that's just a tray I bought at a store, a fixed size. You have to go up and down and trial and error and try each one to see if they fit. And pieces weren't always the same size and of the same age. But on the left-hand side, that image, which is a photograph of rows of shells, and I cut one away and showed my hand placing it in as if that was a 3D set of shells, to give you that illusion. To find shells that were the same size on the beach, struck me, as a terrible thing to have happen. And the more I read about in the local papers about what was happening in the waterways, the more I understood that I was finding babies that shouldn't be there yet. And I collected them, cleaned, and used them, caring for them, in many of the ways that I couldn't have cared for my own child anymore. And I felt a real attachment to them as a result. But the difference between their size and what it is that they would look like in a photograph, was compelling for me.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
And the colors are amazing.
Yeah.
I think the last one, sink or swim, or the next slide, shows you more of these shells. And if when we finish looking at it, I could pick one up. But this row, sink or swim, was really dedicated in many ways to the peril. They would sink together and fit together, but they couldn't swim anymore. They were brought up to the water's edge. So
Meredith, how has your style or your art, your technique changed over time?
It changes every time I put a fish on the table. Every time I figure something else out, a different method, or something different to use, a sponge rather than a brush, or even a balled up cotton. Just every time I do a piece, something new comes to mind. Like right now I'm working with a lot of bait fish, because we're lucky enough right now we have still got quite a few spearing around. So I got lucky and I got some spearing the other day, and I've been making like waves with the spearing. So I take one spearing and I paint it, and I lay it, do a rubbing, and then I look at it where I want the next one to go, and I'll turn the fish's body a bit and ink it again and press it one at a time. So now there's hundreds of them creating like a shape. Or even I just did 2 tilefish looking at each other, and they're each quite large. So seeing the 2 of them looking towards one another once it's done with full color would be a beautiful piece, like above a bed, or it constantly evolves.
I'm trying to picture the bait fish, the spearing.
They're about that big,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a nice
and
size
some are really
spearing,
small.
and you can make any pattern you want.
Yes, yeah, I've been trying to do flowing motion, even just smaller prints of just a few to keep it more affordable. And it's amazing, each piece just comes to me. And I do like to think that I give the fish a chance to live on. Even my chop, everybody that does gyutaku, it's a little red stamp in the bottom of your.
I noticed that on one of the.
And mine I had made in Hiroshima, Japan, and it means in Japanese in the center, it stands for eternal life, because I really feel that they're going on as art.
Right.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
You don't by any chance have a picture of the spearing one, do you?
I didn't bring one with me. I do have photos
'Cause
on my
I'd
phone.
love to see that.
I'll
Sounds
have to
amazing.
show you. Yeah, they're going to be framed and finished.
Well, looking forward to seeing it.
Yes.
Out of what you have to show, what's your favorite piece?
That's a tough one.
Mm.
I'm sure you have a favorite.
That's a dangerous question, right? I mean, you're.
I like my 3 fish, I think. The chub mackerel, the mackerel, and the bonito, from right now, the work that I've
Gotcha.
completed.
And what is it about that
The
you,
colors and the difference but similarities in each fish.
what
And
do
I
you-
love, it almost makes me think of a museum piece or something from history, like the way that they're 3 lined up opposite directions. I really enjoy looking at it.
Just find it pleasing.
Yes, it makes me very happy.
Jody?
Well, I think that the piece that I think I love the most is the one that looks like a dancer. That is the colored whelks that were carved, where I finally allowed myself to look at what was left inside, and that was earlier back, but I think that when that was in black and white, and I place it next to an image that Julia's peers had done of her in 3 dance moves in a black and white, and was preparing a talk about the art, and saw the 2 of them together and realized that that image, her last dance performance, was underneath what it is I had carved and assembled with the shells when I had gotten to the point where I was allowed to put them together in a harmonious manner, that carried her spirit as much of anything. And her work, she's a talented ceramicist, sits next to my work with bowls and seashells, and all of that together in the dialogue of the art speaking to one another is my favorite. So I finished in the slides I offered to you with this one more, made very simply and made very crudely. If you'd like to just see the last piece of a dancer where grains of sand are still on the background, almost for me giving it a slight celestial quality, which is something that I acknowledged in this preparing for today. So this opportunity to talk with you all about the work and to continue that dialogue and that relationship with someone lost is a great gift to me, so thank you. But the oyster shell as the body, and I think they call those angel wings, those clam shells, just so crudely, not affixed, lying on a tabletop, in a position, sharing a sentiment, is, the way she would have danced, and the joy that I get from working on these things, whether you know why I do or not. I hope they, bring an experience to people, that they're not just my therapeutic expression.
Actually, that leads to my next question. What do you want people to feel when they experience your art?
Mine?
Yes.
Hungry. But also just an admiration for the sea and all the different sea life that we have here, so many different species.
Mhm.
I do hope one day, I know it's going to take many, many years, to be able to categorize every one of our species, our local species, even the ones that come up from the Gulf during the summer. Because we have so much sea life here that people just really have no idea what's out there. If one day I go out in the boat and I'm less than a mile offshore and there's whales and dolphin and giant leatherback turtles the size of a car, I'd like them to think, what more is out there? What else is there to see? How better to save the sea?
That's a big thing to put on your kitchen
It
table.
would be
and put
very
a rub
big.
on that,
I did about a 300-pound tuna, and it was too big for my island. I had to put a tarp down on the kitchen floor, crank the AC way up, and freeze the house.
And
I think I probably have a similar reaction. I would like them to feel a sense of calm, a sense of being soothed by what it is they're looking at. But the greatest gift is for them to go out to the shore and see their own beaches and see their own experience with their waterways and with their natural world, with a greater and a new appreciation, because they saw a different interpretation of it, a different way to see it. And I do have friends and people who meet me who will send me images of what they've seen. Oh, I was walking along the beach and I saw this, I saw that. Or they'll collect shells on their next trip and say, oh, I'm going to bring these home for you. And I'm like, that's OPS, other people's shells. I need to collect and clean and find my own things. But I'm so flattered that somebody would have an experience that is maybe a different moment for them with their natural experience than they might have otherwise. They've noticed.
Right.
And I think noticing is the start of an art.
having people notice is the start. You're right.
Mhm.
How would you define success as an artist?
Being able to constantly enjoy what you're doing, kind of more personal success, not, just continuing to evolve and every day be able to create something new that other people also find to be intriguing. What do you think?
I think that it doesn't have to be one thing. I think that it could be two-pronged. I think that your satisfaction, your growth,
Yeah.
and your personal development in your craft and your experience is great. But I am also always plagued by this idea of, if a tree falls in the forest, is it for my own, or does it need to make a sound? Does it need to be something that other people experience, which I think is a goal. I think that what you say and do is wonderful, as an individual experience, but we like to interconnect and we like to sort of exchange thoughts and ideas as a species. And it's nice to know if the art, is doing that.
Yeah, bringing people together.
And to bring people together
Yeah.
and to create that dialogue that you're happy to have hours on end with yourself
Yeah.
all day long. But that dialogue is fed by the reaction of others, the input from others, going to see other people's art, and how it is that I will not go fishing again without taking a print in some way.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
will do that differently, hopefully on your boat. And I think that, so that interaction ultimately, I think is also, it's great when people buy things, but,
It's so much more than that.
yeah. And the fact that it can be, I mean, that you can say that, that is high-minded.
I can't even imagine creating something, a piece of art, something visual that someone else would buy. I just can't even imagine having that talent. I'm so impressed.
It's an honor. It is always an
It's-
honor when somebody
Mhm.
loves the piece as much as you do. Like, I get so attached to my pieces, I'm sure you do too. But
Yeah,
it's-
people want physical things that, oh, I'd like that, I'd like to, but did you sell the this, did you sell,
Yeah,
and I, it's like, or maybe, but I think if I've made it for myself, if I've made it certainly, in a moment of, an emotional, language, that was about my loss, well, those are my pieces. I was making them then. If I am making them understanding that they are, for an audience to buy, then, okay, then I know that, and that emotion is attached to that.
yeah, the detachment is much
right?
easier.
Right.
Like, sometimes people catch their personal best, their biggest fish,
Mhm.
and they bring it to me, and
Ah,
I print it for them, their catch.
Right.
And I'll do it the same day and then fillet it and get the meat back to them so nothing's wasted. And that's easier for me to part with that piece, but
Right.
I also get so connected because I'm spending so much time, every scale, detailing each scale, like giving the fish personality, bringing it back to life again. It's easier, but also still difficult.
Now you've given me something to aspire to. Catching a
Catch
fish.
that bass. Go
worth,
back out
worth
there.
having a print made out of that.
but there is a resurrection quality to what you just said and to how I feel about reinterpreting, what was left behind.
Yes.
That it's moving forward for me with pieces left behind. And you have just kind of put that into words, about breathing new life,
Yeah.
into the specimen. And I'm going to think about that
Yes.
a lot.
I love that you take broken pieces and keep them broken, but create something absolutely beautiful. That just,
I
that's gorgeous.
walk around, living with the broken.
So we're almost out of time, so where can your work be viewed? Judy?
I'm gonna have some shows coming up, and I'm usually around the Southampton Artists Association. I'm a member of them as well. So I'm in Art in the Park in the summer, and a lot of the shows, craft shows that come and go.
And do you have a website people could visit to see your work?
I do. Scalesandtalesprints.com. Scalesandtalesprints.
Okay.
And I do have a website, which is, reluctantly, I joined the, technology element of this, but there's no commerce portion. It's just contact me and an email address. But it's jodycouquier.com, so not as cleverly named as some of my faces. And I currently have a piece at the East End Arts in Riverhead. They have their member show, and I'm in some member exhibitions that are around town when they do come up. And in Town Hall, I just had some pieces that are in the hallways because Southampton Artists provides art for that venue. So I think the website has the exhibition, information and the images, and that's where it is.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you both for taking time out to be here with us today. I've learned a great deal. I almost feel like I have to go catch something now to get a print.
Yes.
And the idea of art as therapy, it just makes so much sense, being able to create. I'm just jealous of both of your talents.
Being able
Thank
to
you.
work with our hands is a true blessing. It's amazing.
Well, that brings our show to an end. For more information about the South Fork Sea Farmers and our work, please visit our website at southforkseafarmers.org. There you can also see past episodes of our LTV series. Thank you. And thank you guys.
Thank